Is superhero movie fatigue real? Not the most cathartic answer, I know, but I can certainly expound upon these non-committal grunts, but you're not getting anything much sturdier than an from me on this one. Then again, who knows? Perhaps I could be moved to a by the end of our little chat, to which I'll be the sole participant. Which is fine, by the way. I don't mind talking to myself. I don't mind being alone. Just a few years ago, superhero films were the best investment in media. Any movie with a Marvel logo slapped above it was guaranteed to make hundreds of millions of dollars at the box office, regardless of its quality. Even DC was turning a buck on some of its slop. The spoils to be had were plentiful, and perhaps mistaken for inexhaustible. But as the age-old adage goes, all things, good, bad, or otherwise, must careen off a cliff, and superhero films and television shows have proven to be no exception. The past year has seen several Marvel and DC projects, bereft of even the slightest modicum of shame, shamble forth like drunken donkeys onto silver and small screens the world round, eager to present and subsequently collapse atop their partially digested dinner. Most failed commercially, some spectacularly so, bringing into question, for the first time in a long time, the prospects of the entire genre. It is now abundantly clear that Marvel films and television shows are no longer guaranteed to succeed, and DC is seemingly incapable of succeeding. Given these critical and commercial failures were preceded by the densest years for superhero content ever, it's easy to conclude that people are just tired of superhero films. It's a fairly intuitive explanation, but the implication just seems insufficient. That the quantity is the sole or principal cause of the fatigue. That if all these superhero films had been excellent, they'd have still suffered the same fate by virtue of being too abundant. It's worth remembering that superhero fiction has been a mainstay of mainstream media for a while now, and though its popularity has waxed and waned over the years, it has never approached anything resembling obscurity. Why is that? I wonder if it has anything to do with how versatile superhero stories can be, even if they rarely deviate from a singular narrative template. What is superhero fiction? Forget conventions and expectations, what elements constitute a superhero story? So far as I can tell, the only thing a narrative requires to be defined as a superhero story is a character with superhuman abilities. This is a fat definition. Sorry, that was rude. This is a broad definition. It's so broad that the word superhero can be effortlessly affixed to other genres. Superhero comedy, superhero mystery, superhero romance, superhero epic. The possibilities are remarkably vast. There's no reason why a superhero story needs to conclude with the good guy punching the bad guy until he wins. Hell, there's no reason why it needs to have action scenes or grand stakes, or even a villain. That most Marvel and DC films adhere to the same narrative structure is not emblematic of any inherent limitations of the genre, but rather the limited imaginations of the storytellers. One of the chief complaints levied at superhero films is that they have no identity, no voice, that they're interchangeable and disposable. This has become increasingly true over the last few years, and it's not inconsequential. If these films and television shows were even slightly novel, I don't think they'd be failing so spectacularly. And that lack of variety, that lack of soul, has nothing to do with the genre to which these stories belong. Why is it that some superhero media is succeeding if everybody is tired of the genre as a whole? Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was successful. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse was successful. And looking beyond film and television, Spider-Man 2 is one of the best-selling games of the year. I will say, 2/3 of the year's superhero success stories being Spider-Man doesn't necessarily bode well for any characters who are less popular than arguably the most popular superhero ever. However, can it truly be said that general audiences are tired of superhero stories when some superhero stories are still very much popular? Furthermore, I don't know what it means to become bored of one of the most well-worn narrative archetypes in history. Superhero fiction may well be a relatively new genre, but stories about good triumphing over evil are as old as time. Well, they're probably not as old as the big bang, and I doubt single-celled organisms shared stories with one another, but surely dinosaurs congregated around campfires to tell the tales of Tobias the Tenacious Pterodactyl or other such heroes from the Mesozoic epics. The simple truth is that people and raptors alike will never grow bored of stories which pit aspirational heroes against contemptible villains, be they superpowered or not. Which neatly brings us back to the question for which the only answer I could muster was a very mild Dare I be so brave and so bold as to divulge an answer comprised of words? Have I become the Batman of fucking tepid takes? Is superhero movie fatigue real? Kind of, but not really. It's more like bad movie fatigue, which, now that I've said it, kind of a glacial take, but sometimes the simplest explanation is the correct one. Now, I'd be remiss not to state the plain and obvious fact that we do not live in a meritocracy. Being good does not guarantee success. Sometimes, great art flounders where soulless commerce thrives, and to believe otherwise is to be astoundingly naive. However, to deny that people are often receptive to good storytelling would be, in my view, an equally erroneous conclusion to draw. Great films and television shows endure in our collective consciousness, including many which did not succeed in their time. The reason why is because amazing stories which speak to us stay with us. We're looking for an experience when we enter into a story. What kind varies depending on the mood that we're in. Be it excitement, melancholy, dread, or joy, we want to experience something. We want to feel something. Given this, is it really any wonder the MCU's profitability collapsed following the release of a dozen god-awful, cynical, and hollow films and television shows? The quantity may not be immaterial to the fatigue, but I think it's far safer to conclude that the quality of these projects, or lack thereof, is the principal reason why people aren't showing up anymore. If the superhero movies and television shows hitting our screens every few months were consistently great, delivering one profound story after another, no sane individual would become fatigued by them. People don't tire of good stories. People do tire of the cinematic equivalent of elephant piss. I certainly wouldn't be surprised if the deluge of dogshit films released over the last few years has prejudiced people against superhero stories, such that the genre as a whole is less poised for success. The Batman and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 are clearly outliers, movies which succeeded despite the franchises they belong to. In that sense, superhero movie fatigue is real, because Marvel, DC, and indeed all superhero media must now work harder to gain the attention they used to receive. The goodwill is gone. What's most depressing about the current state of affairs is that this downward trend was entirely avoidable and could still be reversed, but probably won't. A few good projects could turn the fortunes of the whole genre around, but for so long as the studios creating these films and television shows are incapable of accurately diagnosing the flaws of their work, there's no reason to expect things to change. The main issue is not that these superhero films have bad visual effects, or that they're overly laden with shallow social commentary, or that they're not building sufficient momentum for the next crossover movie, or even that there are too many of them. The main issue is that they're sloppily written, incoherent, thematically lost, and devoid of character and soul. They're just bad.